I'm a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania. Lucky enough to do a lot of work around helping adults quit smoking and helping teens quit vaping and other tobacco product use. Just want to acknowledge some amazing people that I get to work with, and this work, a large chunk of this has been funded through the American Pediatrics and then the National Cancer Institute. Um, so, First off, always some framing. Tobacco remains the leading preventable cause of disease and death in the U.S. Full stop. For more than 480,000 deaths every year are from tobacco. That's one of three. That's one of five deaths, one of three cancer deaths. Adults who smoke die 10 years earlier than their non-smoking peers. We've made huge strides. Back in 1955, 55% of adult men in the US smoked. 55%. We're down to 12%, but that 12% still represents about 34 million adults. And here's where I get involved, why you're saying, why is a pediatrician focused on this work? Those 34 million adults regularly expose 58 million non-smokers to all the harms of tobacco use. 40% of children have biologic confirmation of secondhand smoke exposure in the US. If that weren't enough, there's more than $300 billion in healthcare costs that can be attributable to tobacco. Helping parents quit, one of my big areas of research, is a real policy priority because when we help parents quit, you get all these benefits I show on the screen here. Their life expectancy improves. You nearly eliminate poor pregnancy outcomes. That parent no longer spends more than $4,000 per year on cigarettes. The secondhand smoke exposure is nearly eliminated. And then I think most poignantly, when we help parents quit, their children, that child in front of me, when I'm in my pediatrician role, has a fourfold lower risk of becoming someone who smokes themselves. So what I want to prompt you all today, in addition to the other questions that we have, is to think about how do you best incorporate tobacco treatment into your setting, whether it be a healthcare setting, a community setting. And some of the themes I'm going to touch on through this next work briefly is the importance of learning through doing. There are always great ideas out there. The differentiator is putting it out in practice and be accepting failure, because that's how you really learn. Removing barriers by automating best you can, increasing uptake by really focus on opt-out approaches to care, and then achieving scale by thinking about the whole population you're trying to serve. This is a busy slide. There are all these strategies that are effective across numerous trials. We can come back to this if there are any specific questions about the interventions. The key here is that in a given year, about 3 to 5, maybe as high as 7% of individuals who smoke go on to quit. All these things, physician counseling, all these different medications, dramatically increase the likelihood of someone engaging and ultimately quitting. But the problem is many individuals just aren't aware of services, that whether they be adults who smoke or teenagers who vape. We as pediatricians in the pediatric space, unique position to intervene because parents who smoke are often underserved medically, but they come and see us. They may not have their own physician, their own provider, but all these things get in the way of doing that. And so what we go after with my kind of research and my policy influence, we go after that. And so we've created this system within the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and then expanding outward. And if anyone's interested in this, happy to talk further about expanding this to your care setting, where we focus on asking, assisting with motivational messages and connecting to evidence-based treatment using the electronic health record, a system that's embedded there to really kind of focus directly on the patient, but in this case, the parent. And this is a screen grab. So when a parent comes to their visit with their child for a preventive care well visit, they see a screen ahead of us that says, your clinic is part of a system to help parents, grandparents, adults quit smoking. We're here to help, not judge. And then if you notice here, we don't ask, do you smoke? We ask, who smokes? I'm a clinical informaticist, meaning that I do a lot of work with electronic health records and health IT systems. And part of that is we do a lot of usability testing before we bring things forward. We test the idea of our product, our potential product, with the real users of that product. And families like that little difference, not just do you smoke, but who smokes, because it set the expectation, hey, we know people smoke. We're not here to judge. We're here to help. So what this shows here in this example is when they say who, they can select me or someone else. Oops, let me go advance here. This next screen is a motivational messaging screen that really tries to guide the engagement in more treatment. 5 more minutes of this, bear with me. And then this is the kind of the real innovation portion of this. So regardless of what the physician is doing in the encounter, and many parents complete this ahead of coming in to see their child's doctor. If you say that you smoke, you're then offered one of or any of these evidence-based treatment options. And we default them. We want to really say that if you smoke, you want to engage in services, because if you smoke, you should quit. So the first option is nicotine replacement therapy, which is incredibly safe and effective. No absolute contraindications. Anyone that can smoke can be on NRT. And also connecting to the free quit line, counseling over the phone, or smoke-free text, counseling via text. If they don't unselect this, then the next screen not shown here prompts them to enter their name and phone number and address. And then what happens with the medication is we automatically send a prescription that comes from me as the authorizing provider. It sends it to a pharmacy partner who then delivers the medication to the parent. And they successfully deliver it about 90% of the time, which is great. Removing all these barriers we can to really help people quit. Similarly, for the quit line and smoke-free text, if they enter when they enter their name and phone number, the quit line calls them within 24, 48 hours. And we have partnerships here with the folks on this call where they also engage and help. And then with smoke-free text, they get a text engaging them in services within about a couple of minutes of completing this. The preliminary work was so successful. We scaled this across our 31 clinic primary care network and then across our enterprise. And the data has been remarkably consistent, showing you a sense of the scale here. Since we went live with this system back in the summer of 2021, these questionnaires have been completed more than 700,000 times. We've identified 33,000 individuals who smoke. There's probably duplicate data there. It's respondents who smoke. But we've also identified other household members who smoke. And remarkably consistently, about 37% of individuals who smoke accept at least one evidence-based treatment option. The success has been in the automation of this and really kind of setting the expectations in a non-judgmental way that we're trying to get people to engage in services. Busy screen, but just showing you how we've moved beyond primary care across our enterprise, including even the emergency department, with similar rates of treatment engagement across the enterprise. So in summary of this portion here, this is an EHR-based solution combined with population health approach where we have this pre-visit questionnaire that screen motivates and automatically delivers medication or connects to counseling. Our team behind the scenes handles everything, even if the physician, the provider doesn't do anything. Many of them do. They decide to kind of motivate and try to engage and say, hey, I see that you accepted services. That's awesome. But even if they forget because they're busy and other things take priority, we still handle this. And then I'll close with this portion. Across multiple now randomized control trials, we've identified that this system increases treatment engagement, decreases cigarette consumption. And a new study that's coming out next month, we see a 4% population increase in smoking cessation. That might seem like a small number, but I think those who are experts say that's a big number for something that's very minimally involved, at least on the physician side. So it is increasing the likelihood that individuals who have this system at their clinic go on to quit. One last thing before I close here and then hand over to the Q&A. The power of learning through doing. That's so important. You could think about all the reasons why something might fail, but there's nothing better than putting your idea in front of the people who could be benefiting from it or are going to be the end user of your product. So something that we identified on that previous screen is that of children who come to our visits, about 5% of them have someone at home that smokes. But another 10%, 5% have a parent coming with them to the office who smokes. But another 10% have someone at home that smokes who may not come to the office. And we say, how do we best engage those household members? And so we came up with this idea that we're like, this could be a stupid idea, and people may not like this. What if we ask the person who's completing the questionnaire who's outing that other parent? What if we say, outing for lack of a better term, that someone else at home smokes? What if we ask them, what about, can you give us their name and phone number and we'll reach out to them? And this screen's busy, but that's what we incorporate into this questionnaire. We say that it looks like you have a family member who smokes. Refer them to us. Let us handle the heavy lift. Give us their name and phone number. And what we found, and just piloted this at one of our clinics, about 10% of the time, that mom who completed the questionnaire was willing to refer the dad or the grandparent to us. And we were able to engage them and have them accept treatment at pretty high rates at a population level, right? Rather than trying to motivate someone who we don't even know really, are they actually someone who smokes, but trying to get them in services. Here we have someone who's saying, I know somebody who smokes, and here, could you reach out to them? It actually, even though these numbers may seem small, it's actually big numbers and much more efficient for us to engage in these individuals. And then this was so successful that actually we were able to build this into we were able to receive a large multi-year, multi-million-dollar grant to explore, does this work on the large scale? And that's what's happening right now. We've also added to our armamentarium, to the menu of options for families, varenicline, which is another incredibly safe, effective treatment option, which we can talk more about if that gets to those questions. So I'll close here. I'm actually on my time here. How can you best incorporate tobacco treatment into your care settings? What I've showed you very briefly in this example is that learning through doing, testing ideas, learning through failure. removing barriers by automating best you can. In this example, if you smoke, you should quit, right? We can really automate that best in a non-judgmental way to standardize and systematize that and increasing the uptake by making these opt-out approaches, really encouraging people to engage in services, and then showing you how we've been able to achieve a pretty large scale by thinking about the large population. All right, with that, I'll stop sharing, and then Juliet, I'll hand it off to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we're gonna get into our question and answer session. So just so everyone knows, we're gonna ask a few general questions. These are questions we ask to all of our hosts and all of our experts. But then I also have some specific questions for Dr. Jensen about what he does and just pediatric health and the impact of secondhand and thirdhand smoke, and also just smoking in general on pediatric health. So, my first question for you is, how does tobacco uniquely affect different groups of people compared to the general population?
It's a great question. I can go in very different directions. Maybe I'll start with maybe the most challenging and striking example. Tobacco is the only legal product on the marketplace that when you use it as intended, it will kill you.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
It's not a,
crazy.
it's right. That's not a shocking, that's not a provocative statement. It's true. It's an evidence-based statement. And so maybe when we start with there, then just think about all the range of health risks. I think what's interesting as a pediatrician is I see it across the health spectrum. The vast majority of adult users who smoke combustible tobacco start under the age of 18. So it's kind of under my watch and a pediatrician's watch that this really happens. And there's health impacts immediately in the short term, regardless of the product used. The vast majority of products we're dealing with across the lifespan are cigarettes, combustible, and then vaping devices, e-cigarettes. What's interesting, e-cigarettes start to harm health, increasing the risk of asthma in children, cough, cold, respiratory symptoms. And then the adults, we know about, the leading causes of death. I think if you were to just base this on watching the news, you wouldn't get a real sense of what actually kills people in the US, right? It's cardiovascular disease, right? It's heart attacks, it's strokes. Those are the leading causes of ultimately death. It's cancer. Tobacco makes all of those worse, dramatically so. And every year, I'll close with this statement to your question, Juliet. I like the American Cancer Society every couple of years comes out with their kind of progress report about cancer. And they talk about all these amazing treatments, which are amazing, to help push back against cancer. And they don't call it out as much, but one of the biggest victories has been the dramatic decline in combustible tobacco use, right? That's a big driver of why life expectancy went up. And even in the face of some issues that were, faced on the public health level, why we still see life expectancy go up is that fewer people are smoking. Juliet, does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think back to your presentation where you said, 55% of men used to smoke cigarettes and it dropped to 12%. That's an insane decline. But still, a little higher than we would like. So,
Yeah, let me play one more thing off that
yeah.
because I'm an optimist, a possibilist. Good things are always possible. In these tough times, and maybe times are always tough, but these feel like tough times without me speaking directly to what that tough time is. Let's hang on the optimism that, holy crap, it used to be 55% of adult men smoking, and it shows you all the great things we've done uh, at the state levels, at the local levels, at the federal levels to help educate, to help push back. We should continue to shout that from the rooftops. These things work. We just need to keep focusing on them to drive down something that when people use these products as intended, they will kill them.
Yeah. All right. So as you know, Big Tobacco continues to come out with more and more things to keep themselves relevant. So what trends have you noticed in tobacco use over time?
Yeah, I think your opening is a good one there. We should acknowledge that tobacco is in its own separate category of these companies that have a long history of lies and manipulation to get people hooked into their products and specifically targeting children. And so continues in their playbook is constantly changing the landscape, constantly bringing forward new products to get kids hooked and really pull them along to their core product, combustible tobacco. A product that if you just think about financially, is incredibly cheap to make and incredibly profitable for them. So what they do is continue to bring new products forward. We've seen a great trend down in combustible tobacco use for adults and for kids, but the landscape shifts. We've seen this dramatic rise that seemed to have peaked in 2018, 2019, before the pandemic in adolescent e-cigarette use. We're pushing back best we can, right? Helping educate children and parents, adults about this. But the tobacco companies keep innovating and bringing new products forward. Now, when you look at various surveys that look at adolescent and child use of product, I'll probably for this talk keep emphasizing child, right? Adolescents are children. There's under 18-year-olds individuals who are using. When you look at the survey data across a range of different ways in which we survey, the number one product used of tobacco nicotine products is e-cigarettes. But quickly now, to show you how they quickly innovate, nicotine pouches have become the second most product used among adolescents and children. And the tobacco companies, I'll close this section with this, is they'll run this kind of interference game and say they're really for adults. But the problem is it's kids who use these products at much higher rates. They'll talk about their products again are targeted for adults, but adults don't need and don't want flavors in their products. Certainly not to the extent of children. We do know that with flavors, tobacco companies constantly innovate about bringing new products forward that are flavored. We know that flavored tobacco in any form, flavored nicotine products in any form, increase kind of youth experimentation, youth use experimentation and addiction. So these tobacco companies continue to try to innovate, to repeat myself intentionally, innovate, bringing new products forward to get children hooked on these products and then pull them towards combustible tobacco.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of them, the big tobacco companies, were trying to market the e-cigarettes as, oh, well, it's better than a typical cigarette. But now we're seeing that a lot of students are using e-cigarettes without ever having touched a cigarette. So it's like a problem in itself, is that it's creating this entirely new generation of nicotine addicted users that have never even been exposed to cigarettes.
Yeah, well said. I mean, there's a harm reduction angle that has been, I think, co-opted on the public health side, but it was a message that was pushed by tobacco companies before there was any evidence. So that's why we can't trust, because we have plenty of evidence that we can't trust anything that comes from tobacco companies. Full stop.
Mhm.
Right? That's why we can't let research. That's why as a researcher, I make sure I disclose. I have no conflict of interest related to tobacco and nicotine companies. I would never take any money from them. So there's some evidence that e-cigarettes could help adult combustible tobacco users go on to quit. The evidence is a little all over the place, though. And that's spoken as someone who's adept at analyzing the evidence, but also seen in real world settings what's happening. On the adult side, what seems to be the case is you can get individuals off of combustible tobacco onto the e-cigarettes, but then you go on to use e-cigarettes, and then this whole dual use pattern happens among combustible tobacco and e-cigarettes among adults, which actually might be somewhat counterintuitive, more harmful, interestingly enough. But you have to take a step back and think about the large public health environment and how e-cigarettes represent this path towards addiction. We see that for children, that children who might not have been at risk of using combustible tobacco use e-cigarettes and then go on to become combustible tobacco users. And I'll close to your initial question here is encourage people to think about how they approach this or when they give talks around this analogy that tobacco use is a highway, this highway analogy. Tobacco nicotine use is a highway towards disability, disease, and death. When we think about that highway, we need to think about on-ramps and off-ramps. E-cigarettes may be a off-ramp for adult combustible tobacco users, maybe. But the off-ramp is smaller than the on-ramp that they represent for children to get onto that highway. So when we talk about appropriate regulation, appropriate restrictions, appropriate pushing back, we're trying to protect adolescents. That's the big goal here. And we can still protect adolescents. We can still have it both ways while also helping adults who use tobacco get access to e-cigarettes to help them quit.
Perfect. Yeah, well said. So kind of going off that, what role do you think public health policies, and community initiatives play in reducing this tobacco use and also just protecting people's health as a whole?
That's a great question. It's very broad. I'll say
Mhm.
my short answer to it, the short answer is invaluable. right? We can make a difference at the local level. We can make a difference at the state level. Federal policy is tough right now, but we can still make a difference at the federal level. For example, I think the most recent great example. So let me say broadly, and then the most recent great example. Broadly, it was a combination of all those that helped push back against tobacco use. It was the Surgeon General reports that helped educate the population to say, wow, look at modern day epidemiology was really born out of studying tobacco users and identifying this strong relationship between tobacco use and lung cancer. So strong that we say it's causal, this relationship. There were never randomized control trials to identify that, but we see, wow, this relationship is real. So educating, and then the range of different local, state, federal efforts to add taxes to them, because teenagers in particular are very price sensitive, to focus on the harms around secondhand smoke. You might have the right to use tobacco products, but that doesn't impede upon my right to have clean air. Smoke-free laws that really help protect individuals who don't use, but also help people quit smoking. The rise of pharmaceutical companies that play a role here as well, that helping bring new products to help people quit. All these different efforts are valuable. I would say the most recent one to think about is the Tobacco 21 effort. That bubbled up from a local to a state to a federal level, the idea of restricting the sales, or I should say, let me say the inverse, only allowing sales to individuals over the age of 21. The vast majority of individuals start tobacco use under age 18, and those 18-year-olds usually get those products either illegally from purchase from an inappropriate sale or for someone who's 18, 19, 20. And that's strong support across political spectrums, strong support among tobacco users to say, yeah, I wish I had never picked this up in the first place. And that kind of using good evidence kind of bubbled up to where it is. Now, currently, we need more enforcement around that, making sure that we hold businesses accountable, hold ourselves accountable, saying that no, you really can't purchase these unless you're over the age of 21. But I think, again, back to your original question, all of that, all the public health role, local, state, federal, all matter to help push back against this important key problem.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so another question is, what health problems can tobacco use or exposure to secondhand smoke contribute to or worsen in various environments? I know you kind of discussed this with cancer and heart disease, that kind of stuff, but I'm wondering anything else you're seeing maybe.
Yeah, and I see one of the comments too. I mean, it's when I've done evidence reviews for this, for example, helping write clinical guidelines for our one of my professional groups, the American Academy of Pediatrics, it's like so many health harms are related to any sort of tobacco nicotine product use, right? So the list is long and extensive. It dramatically increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, which includes the risk of heart attack and stroke. Dramatically increases the risk of, I mean, name a cancer. In addition to lung cancer, dramatically increase the risk. When I think about it from a pediatric perspective, people may lose track of this sometimes increases the risk of lower weight infants, increases the risk of prematurity, also dramatically increases the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, or what's now referred to as sudden unexplained infant death syndrome. So just a range of health problems. What's interesting is that it takes time to figure that out, right? We need the time and the investigation of it. It took about 30 years and more to really identify this relationship between this strong causal relationship between tobacco use and lung cancer. So just because right now we might see a new product and people say, oh, there's no health harms, everyone should be skeptical of that because it takes time to identify this. That's what makes e-cigarettes so frustrating and fascinating is that we're already seeing health harms related to it, which gets to one of the comments, is that we are seeing there's a shift in what's available through e-cigarettes and how much content and how much nicotine. So the products constantly evolve. But we're already seeing they seem to work more harmfully at the smaller portion of the lung airways compared to maybe the moderate sized portion that combustible tobacco works. So we are seeing e-cigarettes may actually increase the risk of asthma in children more so at a greater rate than combustible tobacco use, which is interesting. And we are seeing decreasing rates of adolescent e-cigarette use, but in those children who are using, we're seeing much higher rates of use of those products than we would have seen with combustible tobacco 10, 20 years ago. And so we really are seeing this strong relationship between e-cigarette use and poor respiratory health in children already. And so the fact that those kids are already only using it for a brief period of time, already seeing these kind of health harms, I think shows you how potently harmful these products are.
Yeah.
I'll close this by saying, when people talk about um, that e-cigarettes are potentially safer than combustible tobacco products, potentially, right? We don't want to let policy get ahead of the evidence. I'm not so sure that's the case, but also safer doesn't mean safe. You've seen that kind of slogan because it's true, which goes back to my comment earlier. It's a pretty low bar to prove that something's safer than a combustible tobacco because it's the only legal product in the marketplace that when used as intended will kill you. So saying something's safer than something else is not the right question. No child should be using any sort of tobacco or nicotine product because of all the harms it represents for their immediate health and then their long-term health. Juliet, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next couple questions are pediatric specific questions. So I'm kind of excited to see what you have to say about some of these. But my first question for you is, how do you usually screen for secondhand smoke exposure in children, adolescents, and what specific tools have you found most effective in busy pediatric settings?
Yeah, and that's what starting with this talk was our new approach. I think what happens is, as we said, pediatricians are uniquely positioned to help. It's just difficult to do that for all the different things that we face. So we found this is what I encourage those, regardless of your range and the product and where you're focused, trying to automate them with pretty much all humans prefer to answer questions about their health kind of asynchronously, maybe on electronic or paper, but non-face to face. And we found that when we moved to this pre-visit questionnaire approach to ask about secondhand smoke, the rates of tobacco use reporting went up. Probably because maybe people didn't feel as judged, maybe just we're getting better, it's better standardized and systematized. And that sort of approach really helped us. Nothing's going to replace a great doctor engaging one-on-one with an individual, spending hours with them to help kind of address all their health harms, but it's hard to do that. So this approach that we've created, that pre-visit questionnaire that asks, motivates, and engages in treatment, has been a game changer for us in terms of dramatically increasing the likelihood of reporting of secondhand smoke of the child, meaning the reporting of the individual who's smoking, and then doing something about it, actively engaging them in treatment. It's a two-part. So we also treat teenagers. And so what we've really moved to is not asking teenagers face to face, but instead through a pre-visit questionnaire similar to what I described at the start of this talk, where we ask children as part of their adolescent confidential visit a range of questions that talk about their strengths and health risks. And what we found is by that approach, it dramatically increases disclosure of any sort of tobacco product, nicotine product, or other sort of any other health risk they may be facing. Now, turning that disclosure of children, adolescents into action is much more difficult, but it has to start with at least disclosure. So to potentially repeat myself, what we found has really been helpful is leveraging electronic approaches to increase disclosure and then act on that.
Awesome, thank you. And you kind of answered this question already, but I'm still going to ask it just in case anything else pops up.
Yep.
So what are the most common health issues you're currently seeing in your pediatric patients that you can clearly link to second or third hand smoke exposure? And how do you communicate these risks to families in a way that's kind of understandable for them, but also doesn't kind of put them on the spot, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Let me focus on that last portion. Behavior change happens in a place of non-judgment.
Mhm.
I try to remind myself I don't wear a white coat when I see patients, but if I put on my proverbial white coat, I try to, when I be my best self, I try to remember that. Like if we can make the world perfect based on judgment, there's a ton of judgment going around, right? And we're not perfect. So that's what I try to keep this anchor around. Again, behavior change happens in a place of non-judgment. So when it comes to the secondhand smoke exposure risk, we certainly see there's a clear relationship between someone we focus on a lot, which is one of the leading chronic conditions in pediatrics is asthma. Helping parents who smoke or have a dramatically increased risk, smoke or vape, but the strongest data is with smoking, have a dramatic increased risk that their child will have asthma. So what we try to focus on is really not guilty, but motivating the parent. Parents, even bad parents, and there, but the vast majority of parents want to do the right thing by their child, motivating that it's about their health, but also the health of their child. And the health of their child angle really seems to help parents engage in treatment. We've identified that through a variety of different kind of research studies. So that focuses on the parent. The child, that one is difficult, right? Focus on the teenager that vapes. And that's an ongoing problem of how we best engage children around this. In fact, the best evidence around children is this might sound a little counterintuitive, is prevention is our best treatment tool. It's making sure kids don't pick up these products in the first place. Now, then when they do, it's really hard to get kids to disclose that they're using. Okay, we kind of do that at CHOP. We're able to have a system where we increase disclosure using automated pre-visit questionnaires. But then having a child turn that disclosure into acknowledging this is a problem is difficult. So you really try to use motivational interviewing. The latest evidence that seems to be the angle is not focusing on that, using this will increase your risk of becoming a cigarette smoker or someone who smokes and all the issues that then comes with that, is trying to get kids focused on that they're hooked on something that they would be manipulated to use by tobacco companies. So the latest evidence suggests that messaging back of like helping them be free from manipulation, free from teenagers can't necessarily express this, but they know that something's not right, that they're hooked on something. They don't explain it. I don't mean to say this minimizing uh, adolescence at all. The adolescent brain is harder to process kind of longer term thinking. And so it's hard for them to understand that they're going through the cycle when they're addicted to nicotine of use and withdrawal. So getting children to think about, yeah, that what you're experiencing, this like I'm addicted to my vape, I'm kind of beholden to my vape. That's withdrawal symptoms that you're experiencing that's pulling you back. I really try to focus when I'm one-on-one with teenagers or giving talks with teenagers who are using to get them grounded on that. Not, hey, this is an adult telling you should quit because it's going to hurt you in the long run. You're telling me you don't like this feeling that you have to be using something. Well, let's focus on that. Let's help you be less reliant on something. And by the way, tobacco companies love that. They love that you're relying on that. So let's push back. Let's push back against this manipulation from tobacco and vaping companies. It was a little long-winded answer to your question, but is that helpful, Julia?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you're saying is super helpful today. I really appreciate it. And kind of another question, kind of a similar concept is how do you approach these conversations about smoking cessation, especially with caregivers who smoke, and especially when they're not ready to quit, but maybe have children with asthma or, have had premature births or other chronic conditions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, kind of three responses back. Um, One, behavior change happens at a place of non-judgment. So I say that warmly, but we still want to hold people accountable. So what's nice about the automated system that we've described is it's a great way of standardizing and systematizing that. And I've showed you that 38%, 37 to 37 to 8% of parents who smoke accept at least one evidence-based treatment option. That's huge. That's much higher than adult care settings where like in internal medicine or family medicine, when a individual who smokes is in front of their physician provider. Now, there's another part of that. We have compelling evidence across a range of topics that even if people don't accept treatment that first time through, when they walk away from that encounter feeling non-judged, they're much more likely to accept treatment the next time through. So what I do is I try to remind myself it's a population level, it's a long game. My goal is to help people make decisions that better align with their long-term health interests. It's not for them to do what I tell them to do. That doesn't work, right? I'm trying to help them be healthy. That's what people want to do. And so when you take that approach, it's more empowering to say, wow, a third of people the first pass through are accepting treatment. When we look at our system, the next time through, they're much more likely to accept treatment, which is great. They walk away kind of feeling non-judged. And I try to do that across everything I do. And this topic is around tobacco.
Amazing. Awesome. So in addition to that, what strategies, resources, or even pathways do you use to support caregivers in quitting? And how do you tailor your approach for different cultural and socioeconomic groups?
Yeah, great point. So I think what we find the power. I don't mean to be a broken record about the power of using electronic records, but what I see is the power of health IT to help standardize and systematize. Think of it like but the goal right now is that we want to make sure we identify parents who smoke and make sure everyone who smokes is offered evidence-based treatment. That's our baseline. Now we have a whole innovative portfolio that builds on top of that. We're trying to study how do we help people continue to, for example, we know that 37% of people accept treatment. We know that with our system, 90% of people who accept nicotine replacement therapy get it delivered to them. They start it, but there's a drop off after a month. They may not continue to use. It's hard. Quitting is hard. If you imagine in your mind's eye a graph of like starting at 100% of people who accept treatment and starting it, you quickly drop off in the treatment use. So what we try to do is keep providing wraparound around that to keep using the treatment and kind of work through it. So we're doing things focused on the use of text messaging or navigators or quick calls with more focused physicians to then escalate care as needed, adjust doses. I see a question around some dosing and some other things here, and nicotine pouches and other things, which I'll come to. So we really try to innovate around that. There's some other research that shows um, when you mention a culturally competent approach, we make sure that we have services available in multi languages, but you also try to understand the problems that our families face. When it comes to nicotine replacement therapy, a big barrier to continue to use is this combination of not using correctly, because it's kind of hard to use it correctly, and also not understanding and saying like, is this really right for me? So another thing that we're studying is in some of our clinics that have real parent high rates of parents who smoke, having an on-site navigator who gives out medication. It's called NRT sampling. There's a robust literature base around this, but it hasn't really been explored in our context in pediatrics. Giving the medication. So we overcome a barrier of people saying, well, I don't want to go buy it, or how do I get it? And then say, hey, use it now with me here. Let's start using it. I'll help you understand how to better use it. Let's put this patch on. You can put it anywhere on your body. Oh, I see there's a little irritation in your skin. That's normal. We'll just move it around. Let me show you how to use the gum or the lozenges. See, it just kind of try to overcome these barriers. What we find best when we take whatever lens, which helps with our cultural competency as well, is fall in love with the problem and our solution, and then you help develop the right kind of approach, in this case, to help adults quit smoking.
Yeah, awesome. That's awesome. And we talked a little bit about pouches, but I just wanted to kind of understand how you address emerging nicotine products. So obviously we've seen e-cigarette use. We're currently seeing the oral nicotine pouches. And how do you do that when counseling both adolescents and caregivers? And what gaps are you currently seeing in pediatric guidelines and education on these topics?
Yeah, that's a great. There's like three questions, but kind of five questions in there. And
Yeah.
I see Frankie Spears' comment as well. So let me attempt to speak to this all with
Okay.
a couple of comments and pull me back if I get off target here. So first, I think the biggest thought, remember, is about teenagers here and getting pulled into these products. So my counseling is a little different for teenagers versus adults. So first, when my direct counseling with children is to help them understand there's this manipulation angle that resonates with kids. Some of the most effective counter messaging is not the DARE campaign of just say no, right? We know that that doesn't work. And it's, in fact, it's counterproductive. There's some evidence that kids that were exposed to that messaging ends up normalizing product use. But wait, might be something wrong with me. Wait, you tell like people are doing this, I'm supposed to say no to that. What are those things? Counterproductive. It's the counter messaging that's very powerful, exemplified by the Truth campaign that really talked about the lies and manipulation by tobacco companies. Back in the late 90s, I think it was actually 2000, early 2000, they ran this campaign, this body bag campaign. They were showing the number of people that are killed every day from their use of tobacco products and how tobacco companies profit off this and manipulate people into product use. So, with that evidence base, there's evidence that shows that educating people about who owns these products is very helpful. So, what I might say is, do you know? So, Frankie's question about Zyn, I think everyone knows this, but it's worth speaking to. Who owns Zyn? It's a Swedish company, but it's actually Philip Morris. They and Marlboro, remember, the two largest tobacco companies in the world. So when I get it, you can kind of see it sometimes in the aha that children face. They're like, oh, huh. So what I say is, I'm trying to navigate this. I don't want people to say, you shouldn't use. I try to help them make decisions that better align with their long-term health interests. A child will say, I'm using Zim because I'm trying to get off my vape. Ah, tell me more about that. My friends are using it. I've heard this is helpful. Well, let me help you. We don't know. First off, as a doctor, I will tell you that what makes me worried is Philip Morris. We have a long history of tobacco companies trying to target you. They don't try to target me anymore. I'm well after that. I'm well outside that demographic. They're targeting you, so I worry about what Philip Morris is trying to do. Let me help guide you with the evidence base. We don't know if Zyn actually helps people quit. In fact, current evidence suggests it might pull you towards tobacco product use. Let's use evidence-based things that can really help you quit. So, for example, teenager, if you're interested in quitting, we know we have an evidence base around text message counseling via, for example, the Truth Campaign. Their latest, they originally called it This Is Quitting. Now it's called Become an X. Great, a program that's available free to adolescents and adults. We have an somewhat of an evidence base that nicotine replacement therapy is safe. We don't know how effective it is. What's interesting, it's effective for 18-year-olds, but seems to be ineffective for younger children. And part of that is it's really difficult to do the research. It's an evidence of absence, not necessarily absence of evidence. Well, I should say actually it's absence of evidence. What I mean to say, it's hard to do some of these studies. We have a new randomized control trial that suggests that varenicline, the generic form of Chantix, is effective for helping children quit vaping. So we have effective products. We don't have any evidence that Zyn, at this point, I shouldn't even say at this point, we don't have any evidence that Zyn helps people quit. We need to see the kind of the true, strong randomized control trials to leverage that to see if they actually help people go on and quit vaping. And I use a similar line when I really then focus for adults, just helping them educate. Okay, I hear what you're saying, like, oh, you're using Zyn. We don't know if that actually works. Do you want to get more evidence-based products that we know might actually help you? And that's more of a straightforward conversation usually with adults. They've been smoking for a longer period of time. They want to quit. They want access to evidence-based things that can help them go on and quit. Okay, that was a little long-winded answer. I'm not sure if I answered Frankie's question. But Juliet, does that help?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we could also come back to Frankie's question a little bit later. So just for everyone else, like feel free to put your questions in the chat or save them to come off mute a little later. But my final question for you is are there any notable behavioral trends that you've noticed in practices or research regarding, youth tobacco use, youth nicotine use?
Yeah, I think the most striking one is that among adolescents. Well, I can see like the influence we can have at the adult level is clear, right? So trying to incorporate tobacco treatment in any of your care settings is great. I think there's much stronger evidence-based focus on adults, but doesn't mean we can't try to help adolescents. We just have to make sure that we don't let policy get ahead of the evidence. So with adolescents, what we're seeing is what seems to be real, a decrease. We were caught off guard by cigarettes. We were trying to really push back. There was tobacco companies were kind of manipulating people into not pushing back on regulation of them. We are seeing a decline in e-cigarette use in practice, real, but we see a rise of these Zyn products. Well, Zyn is one of the products, these nicotine pouches. We are seeing an increase in intensity of use. So while fewer children may be using these products, we're seeing kids who use vaping products at such high intensity. You might have heard some of this in different formats. They're using the amount of nicotine in a day that's no longer like a pack a day tobacco user. It's like a multi-pack tobacco user amount of nicotine. And that intensity of use is not only causing respiratory issues, but more often than not, it's causing so much mental health harm. Children experiencing withdrawal symptoms, this back and forth, these addiction. We know that nicotine exposure on the developing brain increases the risk of trouble kind of focusing, increases the risk of mental health concerns that we get concerned about, like depression and anxiety, and increasing the issues around attention. So it's that we're seeing this smaller but real number of children who are struggling with this intense amount of nicotine use.
Yeah, that's great. And so first of all, thank you for being here with us. You've been amazing. I'm going to quickly go over some of the resources we have available in New Jersey, but after that, I'm going to open up the floor to our attendees to ask any questions they may have. So I just ask all of you guys to think about any questions you may have. Feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute in a little bit. But for right now, I'm just going to really quickly share a little bit of information about our New Jersey smoking cessation resources. All right. So, of course, we have New Jersey Quit Line, which is a 24/7 hotline available for people looking to quit tobacco or nicotine use. Once enrolled with a Quit Coach, there's access to an online portal with digital resources, and those who qualify will receive 2 weeks of free nicotine replacement therapy, the patch. We also have Mom's Quit Connection for Families, which is meant to help those who care for a child 8 years old or younger quit smoking. There's unlimited counseling sessions, personalized quit plans, and resources to prevent relapse as well. I'm going to go into each of these a little deeper in a second, but I'm just giving a basic summary right now. We also have our quit centers. So if you're interested in quitting with a support group, New Jersey Quit Centers could be a great resource for you. They provide free NRT for those who qualified and also counseling. There's about 11 across the state of New Jersey. So there's one in about half of the counties in New Jersey. So I always say that if it's not in your county, there's one in the county to the left, to the right, a little bit above you or below you. So, um, the Cooperative, we have a bunch of free statewide tobacco services. So I touched on New Jersey Quit Line a little bit, which is for youth and adults. So youth ages 13 to 17 and adults over the age of 18. We have programs for all. You must be ready to quit. So unlike with Mom's Quit Connection, where you don't have to be ready to quit, for New Jersey Quit Line, you do have to be ready to quit. We have 24/7 telephone and web-based counseling, free nicotine patches for qualified callers, and 5 sessions per attempts and 2 attempts per year. So that's about 10 sessions per year. You could call, you could be self-referred, you could be referred by a provider, and you could visit newjerseyquitline.org for a little bit more information. We also have Mom's Quit Connection for Families, which is for pregnant mothers or caregivers with child aged 8 and younger. This could also be, it doesn't have to be mothers, it could be dads, it could be uncles, really anyone who's the primary caregiver of a child aged 8 and younger. You do not need to be ready to quit for this, and we offer telephone or face-to-face counseling in your community with standard business hours, and there are unlimited sessions for this. So unlike with New Jersey Quit Line, where you're limited to 10 sessions a year, Mom's Quit Connection for Families offers unlimited sessions. We also have Quit for Kids, which is for pregnant parents or caregivers with a child aged 8 and younger. You also do not need to be ready to quit, and you receive personalized text messages every week. And once again, you have unlimited sessions available for this. So, a little bit more about New Jersey Quit Line. Once again, it's available for youth between the ages of 13 and 17 and adults over the age of 18. You have access to online dashboard with self-help materials such as TikTok-like videos, animations, podcasts, and quizzes. You have access to chat with a quit coach, and some of the examples of topics covered include health impacts, teens and big tobacco, the cost, the financial, environmental cost, social impact, peer pressure, social circle triggers, substitutes and distractions, and also slips and sticking with the goal. We also have a bunch of tobacco trainings and education available. We have our Ask, Advise, Refer, which is a brief tobacco intervention model. Nurses and CHES individuals will receive one CEU. And we also have a Train the Trainer available for this. We also have Tobacco 101, which is learning about the risks of tobacco use, tobacco's impact on health and communities. We have Can We Talk, which is, very works for this presentation. It's how to talk to youth about smoking and vaping. And this presentation will teach community members how to engage in conversations with their children about the dangers of smoking and vaping. We have our Get Ready to Quit, which is proven strategies and advice offered to individuals who are ready to quit smoking and vaping or know someone who is. We have our new Smoking and Pregnancy, which is a collaboration with the Prematurity Prevention Initiative, our PPI, to raise awareness and provide education about the health impacts of smoking on pregnancy. And we also have our Rinsey the Raccoon Rides Tobacco Free, which is a story time for children between the ages of 3 and 10 to learn about the dangers of secondhand and third-hand smoke. We have a Train the Trainer available for this as well. And a little bit about our colleagues at Tobacco Free for a Healthy New Jersey. Tobacco Free for a Healthy New Jersey is New Jersey's largest collaborative effort to reduce the health consequences of tobacco use and the harm from secondhand smoke exposure through prevention, education, and cessation. We include policy actions such as smoke-free public places, smoke-free housing, and our point of sale initiatives. We also offer community initiatives such as our Tobacco Free Tuesday, Don't Get Vaped In, and Smoke Free AC. And finally, there are some programs such as the Incorruptible Us, New Jersey Quits, and Working Well Tobacco Free. So I'm going to talk about this in a little bit later, but this is our next our next webinar coming up. So for right now, I'm going to actually pass it back over to the audience to see if we have any questions, any comments. I see that Frankie Spear mentioned the social influencer movement encouraging youth to use Zyn pouches for extra energy for athletes. And she asked, what are your thoughts and approaches to this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
Frankie always has a lot of questions. So
no, no, this
thank
is
you.
great.
This
Yeah.
is fantastic. I love it. I'm with RWJ Barnabas Health, so I love the little details we've picked up here. This has been tremendous. Juliet Leanne, thank you so much for curating this. This is wonderful, and I'll zip it now. Go on,
No, no,
Dr.
great.
Jensen.
A couple things. Maybe I'll three things back. One, I included. One is from the American Pediatrics of Pediatricians. It's a clinical report guide that talks about how to do what with with parents and children's in terms of like we review the evidence base for why we make these recommendations, and it goes over how to best support children, parents in terms of tobacco use. And then also, if you want to talk anytime, I can't remember if my email was included. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Always happy to talk further. There's my email. So that's one. Two, I know the role of social media here. It's a tough area, but like the misinformation campaign, and you scratch at the surface, and you're like, so you're taking money from Zyn, right? You make it seem like you're not, and it turns out you are. That's a long history of tobacco companies trying to manipulate people, giving out whether it be free samples or direct payment to individuals to um, advertise for their products. It's I don't I have very strong words for that, and I'll just say, man, how could you do that? But I mean, we have a lot of people who do some questionable things. Now, one more directly, maybe hopefully helpful thing that we can really make a difference around. So the nuance around kind of treatment, engaging people. Nicotine replacement therapy is great. It's so safe. It's a great starting point. Now, when you look at the meta-analyses comparing NRT and varenicline is a little more effective, maybe equally effective to appropriately use combination nicotine replacement therapy. But I encourage everyone to, really have a low barrier to offer that. In fact, we try to really default it, right, for everybody, including mothers who are pregnant. That is, it is safe and effective, right? There's all this good evidence, both through randomized control trials and larger observational studies. Now, what are my quick tips and tricks related to this? So first off, both adults, but especially children who use, always underestimate the amount of nicotine. So, because of that, your default approach with default, remember, and you adjust this, but the default, so you don't have to fixate on which dose. 21 milligram patch, 4 milligram gum, first line, and or lozenge. Lozenge and tough, it's human nature to bite a lozenge. And when you bite a lozenge, you get all that nicotine at once. So that's the first thing. 21 milligram patch, 4 milligram gum. You can always go up and down on different things at the next point. I do have some teens, definitely adults, we have a track record of that, but some teens who need multiple patches because that's how much a day, that's how much nicotine they have. Now, the quick tips and tricks over the last 2 minutes is just when you're starting, because even if you don't, people are much more likely to adhere to a treatment when they know what to expect, even if you didn't do the right counting on a particular side effect. But when you tell them it's not going to be perfect and you got to push through this a little bit, they're much more likely to continue with it. So the two things I really counsel around for like all my quick level counseling, unless there's more questions, when you're using the patch, if you wake up in the middle of the night to use whatever your product is, keep the patch on at night. If you don't, essentially, take it off before bed. That's not perfect, but that's the high level way of getting people to use it. Because if you get it, it's not going to hurt you, but if you get more nicotine than you're used to overnight, you're going to have some weird, vivid dreams. Weird, vivid dreams do throw people off. So you want to make sure we kind of address that. Now, the other thing is just reminding people that gum is not like traditional gum. It's almost like dip, right? This is not something kind of new. I see people nodding here, but it's just worth emphasizing. We emphasize this on our prescriptions when we send this out, and we give flyers and handouts around this. But people learn, and there's nothing like planned redundancy, right? They need to see it and hear it and hear it again. So what we emphasize, it's really like dip. You chew it a little bit till it's chewy. Some people say, the CDC, other websites will talk about till you feel a tingle. I say till it's chewy, and then you flatten it out right in your gum and your cheek. And that's really where you start to kind of absorb the nicotine. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes before you really feel it. So advising people, you're not going to get instant gratification there. If you feel the urges, pop in the gum, chew it, place it. But if you know that, it's 1 o'clock and I know I usually go out and smoke or vape, try to get that gum in your system 15 to 30 minutes before. Yeah, that's a good point, Frankie. I mean, that's why, but these little, we can't solve everything, but these little pointers from us, wherever we may be, from physicians, providers, counselors, can really make a big difference, especially over time at a population level. And now I know we're at 11 o'clock, so maybe I'll close there and hand it back to Juliet.
Perfect. And yeah, if anyone else, any questions come up, please feel free to email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat as well, and I could send it to Dr. Jensen, but he also put his email in the chat, so I'm sure he's okay if you send him some questions as well. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone for being here. Thank you. A big thank you to Dr. Jensen. We really appreciate your expertise. This has been very informative, and I'm excited to take the information you taught into my practice as a tobacco health educator, and I'm sure everyone else is excited to take that as well into their practice as a clinician or a social services worker or whatever that is. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and I highly recommend joining us next month for our next speaker, Dr. Natani Jitnaran, who is the principal investigator at the Center for Fire, EMS, and Rescue Health. So that's going to be a great one as well. So yeah, I hope you all have, first of all, a wonderful week and an exciting weekend as well. Thank you again.